Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Memorial Day. It is Monday. Weather has been just absolutely gorgeous the last couple of days. Hope everyone is getting to enjoy the day. A lot of folks don't have Monday off, so or don't have today off. So but there's a lot of folks that do. I work in the school district, so I have today off, so it's nice. I'm just kind of relaxing today and contemplating what I'm going to do. I'm going to probably get some work in, and then probably I've been just kind of relaxing today. So it's been nice. The weather has been spectacular. I played a show yesterday outside with my friends. My friends and I have this band called Bone Broth, and we played a show yesterday at Primo Restaurant, which is just an amazing restaurant. It is a place that is, if you want one of the greatest food experiences, it is definitely one of the best. It's not a place that, you know, that's cheap, but it's for that, I think it's a cool place to go to for, like a special occasion or, if you want to take out your partner or your wife or your girlfriend, you take them out and you want to have a real kind of extravagant experience. It's that kind of vibe. But a couple of years ago, Primo Restaurant started doing this outdoor bar kind of thing on Sundays. Basically, they renovated this barn that they had and they turned it into this outdoor bar. And then they started having music. They started booking music there on Sundays. And it's a kind of a different vibe than the actual restaurant. It's not exactly super cheap, but you can get things on the cheaper side. And basically, they serve like appetizers and then drinks. But it's such an awesome space. I love. It's probably my favorite gig to do. And we played there yesterday with Bone Broth, which is a band that I play with. That I really love playing. Those guys, the guys in the band, the guys and girls in the band are just so great, and it's always a challenge because all the music is improvised, and I always feel not only is it a super fun experience because those guys are so creative, but it's also really challenging to be able to like try to attempt to play 2 or 3 hours of where it's all like improvised, and I get pushed really hard to like kind of at my ends as far as just listening and then try to use your imagination. And it's a challenge in that way, but it's also so much fun, and I really, really love that band. Don't really get a chance to do that, but we played yesterday outside in this awesome weather. Yesterday was pretty hot. It was almost 90 degrees when we played. And a lot of people don't like the heat, but I love the heat. I am a huge fan of the hot climate. I could live in those kinds of temperatures year round. And today it's a pretty I'd say it's going to be significantly cooler, but very very nice. So the weather has been awesome. We actually have a quantum gig at Primo doing the same kind of thing as I did yesterday. So very very excited about that. That's coming up in July. That's a place I didn't think we would be able to necessarily get a gig at, just because, on one hand, I think some of our music has, an appeal or, a melodic appeal or a dance kind of appeal. But on the other side of the coin, the music I feel is, it's a representation of me completely, but it's it's kind of weird. It's kind of quirky and it's a little bit strange. It gets a little bit out there. So, on one hand, it's not commercial, I don't think, at all. But in some ways, it is, and it kind of totes a little bit of a line. And I've always felt that on one hand, like I'm surprised by people who like the music, and then sometimes I get reactions from people, or we've gotten reactions from people where they're just not really sure what to think of us because of how our music is, and that usually tends to be because of the aspects of our music that's a little bit, I guess not normal or unconventional or just kind of weird. Plus, we use like a theatrical thing, and again, that's my love of movies being pulled into it with masks and other things and props. So, yeah, we actually have a show at Primo coming up next, or actually in July, which I'm super excited about. So, yeah, that's overall playing at Primo is definitely my favorite gig. I just think it's awesome. It's only 2 hours too, and it's outside, and they treat us really well. It's a beautiful location, and I like that it's got this very kind of laid back atmosphere where people can kind of come and go, get a drink or get a little bit of food, check out the music or just go wander around because the grounds are really beautiful. They grow all of their own food right on the premises. So it's very cool. Very, very cool spot. So I did a show yesterday, which I'm in the middle of setting up and putting up on YouTube. And I had talked about that I feel I don't do enough science fiction movies. So this next movie that will be coming up is going to be one of those science fiction movies. This movie Looper that came out in 2012 with Bruce Willis and Gordon Hewitt. Really, really, really awesome movie directed by Ryan Johnson. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming up soon. And again, like I always say, my favorite exploitation, my favorite genre is the exploitation world. So this is a movie that is the definition of exploitation, and I this movie is completely and utterly outrageous, and that is Don't Deliver Us from Evil. This is on my favorite movie label of all time, and that is Mondo Macabre. Probably can't see that there, but Mondo Macabre. I have a pretty big, huge collection of Mondo Macabre videos. I don't have all of them, but I have probably about 30 of their movies, give or take a few. Mondo Macabre is my favorite label of all time. They specialize in the most obscure exploitation movies that you can find and that you can think of. And the amazing thing, out of all of the movies that I've bought from this label, I had probably only seen one of them before. Every time I've bought one of these movies from Mondo Macabre, it's always a new discovery, and they all just kick ass. Like, the amount of diversity that they have on this label is just amazing. The one thing that they all have in common is that they're all like super low budget exploitation movies. But other than that, I mean, it's all over the place. One movie that I really love that I discovered from Mondo Macabre is a German movie called The Fan, which is about this obsessed fan who is stalking and ends up becoming the lover of this rock star. But just an amazing movie, and I had never seen that before or heard of it before. And it's from the '80s, and it's the super low budget kind of art house exploitation movie, but just an amazing movie. Silius is another film. That movie is this Filipino movie that is just completely outrageous and so perverted, and yet such a masterpiece. Just, so many great movies I've seen and that I own from Mondo Macabre. Mondo Macabre is a label that I love so much that anytime now, if I don't own it and I see a movie that they have out that has their label on it, I automatically pick it up. I just don't even, sometimes I don't even look at the movie. I just pick it up. If it says Mondo Macabre and I look at the title and I don't have it, I just snatch it up. And this is one of those movies. I had just heard about this movie, actually. It's funny. It was actually after the fact. I was in Bull Moose a few weeks ago in Waterville, and I came across this movie, and this was the title from Mondo Macabre that I did not have, so I snatched it up, and it looked completely perverted and just amazing. And then 2 days ago or last week, I just watched this last night for the very first time. And then about 2 or 3 days ago, I was watching Mood 616 on YouTube, who is my favorite YouTube guy. Definitely, if you're on YouTube a lot and you like watching reviews of movies, he does some music stuff too, but it's mostly all movie stuff. And Mood 616 is a YouTube guy from Canada, and he's the best. He's the best guy on YouTube. He uh, he really specializes. I mean, he covers all kinds of movies, but he really specializes in covering all kinds of movies like this. And he's such a huge fan of the exploitation world, and he takes these incredibly deep dives of all kinds of wonderful movies. And I have learned so much from watching his channel. There's so many great movies I've gotten turned on to, and so many great directors that I've gotten turned on to from him. You know, directors like Jess Franco. So many great directors. I've gotten really into even through his channel, even more so through into the Italian cinema, Italian exploitation movies, the giallo films that came out in the '60s and '70s, all of the great horror exploitation movies. Just so awesome. And I've also like it's brought me back to a lot of films that I grew up watching. So, but most of the time, for me, it's about discovering all of these really obscure movies like this one that I've never seen before. And I was watching his channel the other day, and he talked about this very movie, and it was awesome. And I hadn't watched it yet. And this movie is completely outrageous. I don't even know how else to describe it. It's a French movie, and it came out in 1971. It's actually one of the most controversial movies ever made. It was directed by Joel Seria, who is a French director. This movie is so outrageous. Like in the review by Mood 616 where he was talking about this movie, he's a huge Mono Macabre fan too, but he was talking about this movie, in a real general way. He's really great about talking about movies because he doesn't give. There's no spoiler thing. He leaves it really. He gives a really cool, general, broad description of the movie, just enough to like make you interested, which I really love. And it's not like a conventional guy who or conventional person on YouTube where they'll just review a movie and go into all these details. He'll like just say enough that if it's something that you might be interested in, you'll want to see it. And that's what I love about the way he sets up his videos. But the whole premise of this movie, well, in this when he was talking about it at the end of him talking about this film, he was saying, this honestly, Don't Deliver Us from Evil from 1971, which is a French film, would never get made today. Like, there's no way in hell that this movie would get made. And it's completely true. I saw that review about it before I watched this, and I watched this last night. And I have to say he was 100% right because of the raunchiness of this film and the blasphemy, if you want to call it that. It's centered around these two girls, and they're very very young. They're basically like, I don't even think they're in high school. Like maybe they seem like they're so young, which already is kind of off-putting and kind of weird. But the two girls, it's centered on these two girls that are in Catholic school, and I don't know their age exactly, but I'd say they're probably 14 or 15. And basically these two girls decide together in this pact together to reject Christianity and reject their school and reject their religious teachings. And they decide to basically have this pact with the devil. And after they swear this allegiance to the devil, or they have this pact with the devil between the two of them, they decide to indulge in every kind of perversion you can think of. And it's outrageous. There's a couple of scenes where are generally they're very disturbing, but there's a couple of scenes of where they intentionally entice these guys that are much older than them, which leads to these kind of rape scenarios. And they eventually get out of some of these situations, but on one occasion, they actually kill this guy, and then they bury the body, and it's really messed up. And it's pretty graphic. It's a pretty graphic movie. It's actually a very slow movie, and it takes a while, but it's actually shot incredibly well. The direction is really, really awesome. It's a really great character study. It's a higher brow of a movie than I thought. I thought this movie was going to be even more rough around the edges, but it's actually beautifully directed, beautifully shot, with a really cool script, a very interesting story, but it is again incredibly sleazy, pretty disturbing. The ending for this movie is completely and utterly fucked up in every way possible. I My jaw kind of dropped at the end of this movie. I was like, holy shit! Like that's why this movie would never get made. The main reasons I feel like this movie would never get made, and to think that this came out in '71, and I guess reading about this movie, it was banned basically everywhere. It was, and this was in the '70s, so things are pretty different now. And I think in some ways, there's less tolerance for art these days to a degree that pushes the envelope, and this definitely does that. But I think it's definitely a sleazy horror exploitation movie. It's But I also feel like because of how well this movie is actually done, it's kind of an art house movie. It's actually really really good, and it has that art house quality to it. And it's a foreign film, but I think the two reasons that this movie would never in a million years see the light of day now would be because of the centerpiece of the story being that these two girls are essentially underage, very underage, and they get and they throw themselves into all of these like wild and kind of insane sexual scenarios. And they're like the lead characters. So that wouldn't fly probably today at all. And then it also involves the the obvious kind of nature of the film of where these two girls are going out of their way to reject their Christian faith and to, you know, indulge in every conceivable blasphemy that you can imagine in order to throw that out. That would be also another factor. But then it also deals with the death of children, children dying on screen. That is a highly controversial thing. So those two things are double fucking whammos that if you have those in your films now, they won't get made. Period. I don't think either of those films, where essentially you're dealing with underage sex, rape, uh, to a degree, pedoph- pedophiles, and then seeing children die on the screen. Two incredibly high level, if you want to call it that, high level taboos, which I can understand. I can understand people's reservations to seeing content or reading content like that. I did a show recently on The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director of all time, and I was the focus of that show was The Shining, but I talked a lot about his other films, and that other one of the films of his. I love all of his films to death, but one of the other films besides The Shining that I really really love, that's really close to being probably in the top two or top three, is Lolita. I love that book and I love that movie so much. And I feel like that movie is not as much, it's not talked about as much in Kubrick's career. It's usually The Shining or 2001 A Space Odyssey or probably Doctor Strangelove. Those three movies are probably the most referenced movies in his career and probably his most popular. Lolita, not so much. And I attribute that because of the subject matter, because that movie is, and the story is so incredibly dark, and it totally focuses on some of the scariest kind of taboos that we have in our culture. And because essentially that story is about the lead character who is a pedophile and he has an affair with this, or yeah, he's having this affair with this 13-year-old girl. So again, I understand that. And I talked about the story of where years ago I had told a friend about that movie and the book, and I had given them Lolita by Nabokov to read, and they were just completely and utterly disgusted by it, and they didn't finish it, and she gave it back to me, and she wouldn't see the movie because the theme of, essentially it's about a pedophile, an obsession, and it's you know crazy, but um and so I understand that, and Don't Deliver Us from Evil definitely tackles those themes, but even takes it a little bit, well, it takes it a step further. This movie is definitely a sleazy exploitation movie. I think it's also, like I said, like a French art house film too. It's got that going for it, and it's also a horror film. It's definitely a horror film too. So it's got a lot of cool elements, and it's, like I said, it's got this really cool base where it's really centered on these two girls, but the writing is so good, and the kind of the characterization in this film of all of these different actors is really good. It's really interesting. But because of the subject matter, and it also ties in, like I said, the main thing is about these two girls rejecting their Christian faith. But there's also scenes and things of where, it involves priests and nuns who are also involved with pretty disgusting things. It ties in that also. So this movie, like, there's no way in hell, pun intended, that this movie in a million years would be made because it deals with all those things. I mean, you have, like I said, the ultimate taboo, and the one of the most disturbing things is the idea around pedophiles and sexual forbidden sexual taboos, the blasphemy against organized religion, particularly the Catholic Church, and we've lived through all of these things, especially with the horrendous scandal of the Catholic Church over these years because of the revelations of them basically protecting and to a degree rewarding the clergy who are part of the Catholic Church, who are all monstrous pedophiles, and also, you know, the death of children. That's a really still a big taboo. I know a lot of people won't watch a film if it involves kids who are getting killed in it. And again, so it's amazing that this film, like when you think about it in that context, like there's literally stacks and stacks of things that would not let this film be made today if it came out. Like it's wild. It's wild. But this movie again is so beautifully shot. I've said before, I love films where there's like this cool juxtaposition where I have a real high tolerance for watching, things that are very disturbing. But, at the same time, I don't like things to be shocking for just the shock, that impact. I want there to be, a good story. I want there to be a cool atmosphere. I want there to be great cinematography. I feel like there are movies out there, obviously, that have, an overabundance of maybe gratuitous sex or violence. And to me, it's like a lot of the times you can see that when it's used to such a degree, with sex or violence or like rape scenes or whatever, where it's used to the degree, to such a degree of where the filmmakers decided to go down that route to such an extreme because it's like they're trying to overcompensate. I feel like they're overcompensating for maybe the story not being very strong or the acting being very strong or even the atmosphere being strong. It's used to kind of fill that void of the story actually being good. Whereas I feel like this film has things in it that are incredibly disturbing and incredibly hard to watch. But the story and the atmosphere and the overall craftsmanship behind this film is really, really good. So when you see these shocking scenes, and again, it's very slow. It's not like every other scene is like somebody getting raped or killed or whatever. It's like it's actually a very slow movie, and there's like 4 or 5 scenes in this film where it's really disturbing. And it's almost a 2-hour film, which is longer than a lot of the other exploitation movies. A lot of exploitation movies are an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half hour, or an hour and a half. This is almost 2 hours. But so I feel like because the movie is crafted so well, when you do have those moments of where it's really jarring and generally hard to watch, it's even more powerful. As opposed to like a film that overcompensates and just fills the movie with as much of those extreme elements because it doesn't really have any weight to it. I think a film like that, a very modern day film that has that, and it's loved by a lot of people, but I have felt that it's pretty overrated and it was like kind of like cotton candy, is a movie like Terrifier. Really cool in some ways, but I liked that movie when I first saw it, but then after a day or two passed, all I remembered was the gratuitous violence, which is pretty gnarly and kind of amazing because I love gore. I love copious amounts of violence and just disturbing shit. But it's got to have a story. It's got to have atmosphere. There's got to be characters in it. There's got to be something about it that is going to come forth, is going to be the main thing. And then the gore and if there's violence and whatnot in the film. Even in the most low budget exploitation movie I can think of or that I have seen, still for me, at the end of the day, it's still got to have some good characterization and an atmosphere and some decent directing. And it's got to be some kind of a story. And all of the extreme elements are secondary, even in the most low budget exploitation movie. And I think that this movie totally exemplifies that, and it really does have a really great base for the story. And I feel like as a viewer, when a film director or when you have a group of filmmakers that are making a movie that has this really strong base or has a good base, when you introduce those other elements, it's even more powerful. I feel like when it's the other way around, it, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like going to an amusement park or like say eating a bunch of cotton candy and it like tastes really good and it's at first, but then the next day you don't even think about it anymore. Whereas like a movie like this, I'm still thinking about it because it deals with so many kind of heavy questions and so many things. So a wonderful movie, 1971. This Blu-ray transfer is spectacular. There's all kinds of special features on here that are just so awesome. Love this movie. Love this movie. Mondo Macabre remains the best company around. I highly recommend it. Don't Deliver Us from Evil, 1971, this French movie. A movie that they truly could. This is truly a movie that could not be made today. So this is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. If you like this channel, please subscribe and keep the comments coming, and have a great day. Peace.